Hey everybody, this is Talking to Carl back again with some more X-Men related reviews. And today's comic will be covering the 6-issue run of Jubilee, written by Robert Kirkman. And I want to find a good. I ain't trying to read the one where she turns into a vampire. I think that was stupid. It's still stupid. One of the stupidest things that they've done in comics. Lesser tier of stupidity, but still stupidity nonetheless. So I think it's like a fun little romp adventure with Jubilee in LA, where she's very native. And I'm surprised, like Robert Kirkman. You'd be surprised how many things that's non-zombie related that Robert Kirkman got his hands on. But yeah, I made this discussion video a couple of years ago, which should be on my YouTube channel as youtube.com/talkativecarl. You can find a link to my YouTube channel and a link in the description below, as well as my Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, Odyssey, Instagram, so forth. And I mentioned in my discussion video on how I would make a Jubilee movie. If I was, working with like Kevin Feige, and it's like, I got a pitch for a Jubilee movie, and I actually looked it up, and there was like a particular like villain that she fought and everything like that, make it her thing, and like her arc, with like coming to grips with like, racism because of her being a mutant, and when she's Chinese American, and lean into that as well. Especially after Shang-Chi, you can definitely, people will be hungry for some Chinese representation in superhero community. She's number one. She's like one of the iconic 90s type of teen superheroes that was out there. Her iconic, pink shades and yellow coat. And since like James Gunn and the Guardians of the Galaxy like to shove the 80s music down our throats all through the trilogy, Jubilee needs to have like a plethora of 90s era music. And like I remember in the video I made like a list of songs that you can like really lean into, and definitely highlight malls. He's a mall rat, and it's like, you have her just, because malls are still around, just not a popular hangout anymore, and just have her just like hang out in the mall and bring that back, because 90s nostalgia is all the rage, and this is like probably one of the best decades in history, personally, in my opinion. And it's like, as a perfect person to do that with is Jubilee. Even bringing back stuff like, I don't know, like Walkman CDs, people don't have that anymore. And I mean, you don't even lean too far into that, not like with Starla with having like 8-track or whatever, but just she listens to music on her phone, and like it's, most of her songs are 90s era, and she just has like a love for the 90s. You could easily reboot Jubilee to fit in modern day society, but she just has like a love for the 90s era. Maybe because she grew up with parents, because she's adopted, grew up with parents who, put on a lot of 90s music and watch a lot of 90s films, and she makes quotes from the 90s. But she's, cute, fun, and got this popping energy. And leaning with her powers, where she just starts off with just making like little fireworks, but grow to, by the end of the final battle with the big boss, grows these gigantic, spirit bomb Dragon Ball Z level energy balls, and just takes out her adversary. That's how I would have pitched it. Because I love Jubilee. Not many people care for Jubilee. I love Jubilee. She was so much fun in the 90s TV show, which I will cover season 1 of the X-Men 90s show soon after this. So look forward to that. But anyway, here in the story, Jubilee finds out about her having like a long lost aunt, where her parents had a falling out with her, so neither one knew each other ever existed. And it was a very opportunistic time, considering that Jubilee needed like a change of scenery. You know, I guess like, you know, the X Mansion gets like, you know, blown up one too often, and like the craziness that is the X-Man's life. She's like, okay, I need to step away from this. It's like, you know, it's too much. So she goes back to LA, lives with her aunt, who has this, you know, cool mansion. Let's put it like that. She's kind of like had like a mansion. And since like, you know, Aunt Hope doesn't know anything about, you know, Jubilee's interests, you know, she formed her bedroom to look like some kind of cliche teenage girl's bedroom with full of pink aesthetics and boy band stuff. And, you know, Hope was like, you know, I mean, like, Jubilee's like, I don't have the heart to even say how corny this all looks, but she is glad she has like a nice spot. And there's a funny moment where Hope make a comment about her yellow coat, you know, how out of date that looks. It's just funny. It's like, you gotta point that out, but I don't know, you could definitely bring that back or rework it a little bit. But I want to mention about like the art in this. The artist changed up a lot throughout this run. It's supposed to be 6 issues, and for some reason you can't keep the same artist along for just 6 issues. But the first 2 issues, I like the art better. It's not mind-blowing, but I like it better than what comes later, because it just seems like it gotten very lazy, in my opinion. And so now Jubilee's starting to get enrolled into school, and it's like, why are you still in high school? I know you gotta like rework the time frame. It's kind of like with Magneto, where he should be like too old to be fighting against the X-Men, or at the very least should have been long since passed away. So you kind of have to like rework some stuff to have Jubilee to be maybe not a perpetual teenager, but being her late teens, early 20s kind of thing. So she's enrolled in this high school, and right away this kind of like, you know, I don't know, this principal who just like got a bug up his butt for no entire reason except like he just doesn't like kids in general, or just like he's super rule following, and like, you know, telling one of the guidance counselors that she called him by his first name, was like, is Mr., you know, it's principal blah blah blah, thank you very much. He's all rules and regulations, very, you know, not one to like veer off course with that. So he's already in Jubilee's face. But Jubilee also managed to make a friend here named Meg, who is this kind of nerdy girl who is an introvert and constantly gets picked on. And you see like a good, you know, compare and contrast between how this girl gets bullied compared to how Jubilee would get bullied. And it's a little bit harsher, considering that later on people find out that she's a mutant. But it isn't like no picket signs, like, you know, get mutants out of our school kind of thing. It's just like, you know, just people just using the words just to antagonize her. But there's one jock dude who is like one of the popular kids in school, you know, immediately took up an interest with Jubilee. And despite Meg's warning about like stay away from him because he's got a crazy girlfriend, and I had to put up this image here. This girl looks like a complete psycho, and because I'm reminded with my Spider Girl review, which you can check out on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl, where I talk about the alternate universe where Peter and Mary Jane had like a daughter named Mayday Parker, who goes through high school and deal with, you know, some antagonistic students. Here, even though it's a 6-issue run, you expect this girl to be a little bit more adversarial, but you know, this is like the only time you actually see her like, you know, interact with like the main cast. So she's trying to step up to Jubilee, trying to frighten her because she's one of those kind of cliques where she can get her way because she's popular and whatnot. Classic teenage high school kind of drama. But Jubilee ain't having none of that. It's like she points out later on, like, you know, I tangled with like Magneto and ran with like Wolverine. It's like, this is really not a big deal to me. And I like this because he shows like, because people typically remember Jubilee from the 90s show, and they barely read anything with her in it since then. And I wanted to bring this up because it shows Jubilee is mature than people give her credit for. And given the fact that like maybe prior to the X-Men, she probably would have been more intimidated by this girl. But she was, you know, she she lived in the mall when, you know, she was orphaned as a child. She was essentially homeless. She like rolled with the X-Men. She fought in battles, and she's kind of like, if you think about it, Jubilee is kind of like a battle-tested, you know, kid, like many kids at the Xavier school. So she, you know, like confronts this girl, but she's classic high school drama. She's got to be the one that gets in trouble, and since she's the, you know, the other girls, the popular girls, and probably has parents that fund the school, not going to get in trouble. So that's when like the principal was like, why did you tell us you was like mutant on your application? And it's like, oh, your enrollment form. And of course, I like Jubilee's response is like, there wasn't no box to check off on that part. It's like, you know, why should that even matter? Like, you know, kind of situation. And the principal is ready to expel her right off the bat, where the counselor steps up and it's like, you know, we can't like, you know, just do that, but you know, we could just do like a after school program with her where she helps out the counselor, talks with other kids who's having problems, which really gives like Jubilee, like, you know, shows off more of her maturity, because, you know, even though she still doesn't think like she's doing much, but it's kind of like all the stuff that she learned from Xavier is rubbing off, that she doesn't even realize is rubbing off. And despite Jubilee is kind of like, she doesn't want to deal with that. She just kind of want to live her life, you know, be a normal kid, but she doesn't want to get expelled. So she, you know, rolls with, you know, helping out with the guidance counselor. So she spent a couple of days, you know, again, testing on how to deal with various kids who comes to the office with various problems. And like, you know, Jubilee's like, you know, back and forth, you know, with this counselor lady, and she's like trying to run tests, like who, like, you know, given like different circumstances, how would she respond? Like, my boyfriend and I broke up, good riddance. Sally made fun of me, my acne, slap her. I think I'm pregnant, slap him. I'm stressed out about college, don't go. Okay, stop. It's like, I like that response. It's like, it's just, I don't know, it's like, I mean, like, you probably might not agree with, because I mean, it's not a very traditional way of handling certain things, because Jubilee's just, you know, not interested, but this is kind of like her honest, short, sweet, to the point answers, where it's kind of like, that probably would, at least half of these could be right responses. It's like, if a kid doesn't want to go to college, it was like, or you're hesitant on going to college, just don't go. If you're not 100% sure that you want to go to college, don't make the kid go. And it's like, you know, find another outlet and, you know, have them like start, you know, getting, because I had this conversation with a coworker of mine where it's like, because uh he mentioned, he was a good friend, he mentioned about him wanting to be a zoologist, but like his parents want to do other stuff and whatnot. And it's like, you know, parents got a nasty habit of like, you know, not, because you want the best for your kids, but it's like they got their own agency at a certain point in their lives. And it's like college is like a horrible racket. It's like capitalism at its worst, where it's like you're pretty much, you know, paying to be in debt. And unless there's a particular field that you're going into that requires you getting like a particular degree, like a lawyer or like a physician, you know, or something to that, akin to that, then by and large, they're like, I took acting classes. I didn't go to I want to say a fancy college, quote unquote, but it's like I didn't need to go to a college. You can, but it's like you don't need to go to a college, you know, like in some kind of Ivy League, whatever, to learn, you know, acting if you don't want to. I looked up online, acting classes that I can take at a particular facility, pay a certain amount of money for a few, at least 8 weeks of learning courses. Of course, you can pay more if you want to take like, you know, from beginner, immediate, advanced kind of situation, 8 weeks per. Of course, you can do that, but you know, by and large, you can just do that. You don't need to spend like years of your life, you know, X amount of money, putting yourself through debt for something that you can, by and large, you know, take a few weeks of some training to get the same results, and vastly cheaper by comparison. But like I said, I like the response with Jubilee because it seems like very straight to the point. Don't recommend putting your hands on people because like, oh, she made fun of my acne, or I'm thinking I'm pregnant. Like, you know, you don't just put your hands on people, whether you're a man or a woman or non-binary. Don't put your hands on nobody. But just like, you know, that's where you probably need like the, you know, more long-winded kind of guidance from certain counselors. But while at home, Jubilee's aunt and her butler, as a, you know, for the sake of arguments, call him Alfred. They're, unbeknownst to Jubilee, until like the tail end of the last issue, doesn't know these two are hip man and woman. Essentially, you think of like John Wick, where she, you know, works for this mob boss, but you know, she's trying to get out, but he's doing that one last job kind of situation. Of course, Jubilee is none the wiser about it, and of course, she's like playing off like that cool aunt kind of situation. Not really, not necessarily you need to be like all in her business, but she's playing like oh, like, you know, I don't know, it's very like, you know, like not, you know, making sure that, you know, Jubilee is doing her thing in school, like making sure like, oh, well, it's hard to say, you know what I'm getting at, where it's like the opposite of being like a helicopter parent, where it's like, you know, not acknowledging what's going on with her at all and just leaving her to her own devices, which she more often does. Just, oh, you need more money for this week because I'm gonna be gone for this kind of week. You can handle it yourself, kind of situation, kind of, you know, thing. But kudos to here with Jubilee, because she's a little bit more mature than people give her credit for. Whereas like when she has to stay out late, because like Hope brings up, like, you know, just make sure, like, you know, if you're gonna be late, you let me know, or try to be here before, you know, sometime around dinner time. but Jubilee makes sure like, oh, like I'm gonna be late night studying with Meg when I'll be back around like 10 p.m. sometime around there. She's doing a responsible thing where making sure like, you know, she let her aunt know what's up with her so she won't worry about her kind of situation, which is something you're supposed to do. So I'm glad there's like no issue on the home front like that. But you know, all the bullying really shows like, you know, because is Meg's getting it, like, you know, so far as like the bullying, because you don't often see that with, it's usually like the males, teenagers that, you know, you see more often than not getting bullied by people. But it's very rarely you see like an actual female getting the brunt of this. Like, it's not saying that they don't exist, but I like it when you like Meg talks about how like the girls still in a bra in the ladies' locker room and hiding it, so I can't like, you know, show off. You know, I had to hold my backpack against my chest because I don't want people seeing my nipples and things like that. And then the gymnasium having like this heart to heart. Oh, when there's a moment like a lunchroom where it's like some random kids just being just nasty to Meg, and then Jubilee comes to sit down, and some idiot boy makes a comment. It's like, "Here comes the mutie. You know, what are you gonna do? Like, you know, you gonna heat vision her eyeballs off?" And Jubilee was like, "You know, that's not a bad idea. I might give that a try." Yeah, something like that, and really quickly shut that up. Knowing that she has powers, as little you can do about it. If she felt inclined to, she can. Well, Jubilee, yeah, bare minimum can blind you, but if push comes to shove, she can, you know, put those pyrotechnic plasmoids or fireworks, layman's terms, so close to your eyes and cause your party head explode if she felt so inclined to, or if a writer work it to a degree where these things are explosions. If you think about it, they just go off like fireworks because it's how most of it normally displayed. But Jubilee can be a dangerous, you know, powers can be dangerous if you play it the right way. So Meg is having a heart to heart with Jubilee, talking about how she's having a hard time, and like how does Jubilee stand it when people just constantly talk to her nasty like that and woo woo. Jubilee just points out to her like, you know, I hear all this crap all the time, and it's like they only have power if you let them have that kind of power, kind of situation where you're just like, you don't let it get to you, that kind of thing. You know, it's like, you know, because, you know, all they doing is are just being jerks. That's all they are. And they, you know, and they talk crap, but they don't have no control over you. And this kind of thing this kind of dialogue is probably my favorite part in the entire run, where it's just Jubilee just laying down some knowledge that, you know, you rarely see from her, and like I really like. And next day, the guidance counselor comes to Jubilee saying like, you know, I got word from Meg saying like you help her out a great deal with her problems, and like I was very impressed. And Jubilee doesn't think nothing of it. It's like, I just talked with her, and she said like that's the job. You're their age. You can relate more so than I could ever do, and all they need is somebody just sit down and listen to them. So like I said, like the whole Xavier thing is really rubbing off of Jubilee, whereas like she can just like just by second hand, just reflex, does what Xavier probably would have done in her situation. Then this part it gets kind of slow, where you meet this kid named Charlie, who's running with this kind of gang, led by this 16-year-old out of nowhere, named Shane Shooter, who turns out to be a mutant himself, who has the power to set out these little light beams from his fingertips. But, you know, if he actually focuses it on one or two particular fingers, it's a little bit more is a lot more stronger. So he always, comes out like, finger guns and kind of thing, and he's very accurate with those. So of course he uses that to lead a gang. And Charlie goes to school where he has to sit with his guidance counselor who has Jubilee talk with him. And you see this in a fair bit of like movies where it's like, Jubilee doesn't, never lived in the kind of neighborhood that Charlie lived. Typically like those rough black neighborhoods where, disenfranchised, not much opportunity, where Jubilee points out, yeah, like I never lived your kind of life before, but it's like you're a very smart kid and you got like, awesome grades. And it sounds to me like that gang of yours is holding you back. And it's like, he's doing everything he can to destroy his life because he doesn't feel like, he doesn't have the opportunity or, what's as the case is going to get him anywhere. And that's when Jubilee had a talk with Shane, who explains to him that he's a smart kid, he's had awesome grades, but until he starts running with you, all that stuff's starting to fall by the wayside and you're holding him back. Now, I understand that you're trying to turn this kind of scenario on its head that you probably seen like a million times in movies back in the day, but more often than not, it wouldn't play it that well. Mostly because this is like a guy who's 16 years old, who more often than not would probably be a lot more immature. Because he's a lot more understanding than in realistic cases would be then it would likely pan out that way. Because he's a lot more understanding, like he's probably in his like 30s or 40s being leading a gang where it's like, I probably will him leading this kid back. He probably got, some stuff that he can probably get out of his life that I never had the opportunity and blah, blah, blah. But, a guy like this typically was like, you stay away and like really lean into making Charlie doing some bad stuff and doing shootouts and blah, blah, blah. That's how you probably would imagine it playing out that way. I'm not sure whether or not, I mean, like, I can give it credit for doing something like that and turning on his head and making you think one way and is doing another. It just seems easy in a way. So Shane ultimately just like having like some kind of epiphany, like he never realized that this guy, like what did you think about Charlie? Like, clearly you are a little bit more resourceful than people realize. You never really like checked on like, Charlie's like, situation, like why you want to join up with your crew and whatnot. It's like you don't get much with Charlie, and you think you'll have like some kind of thing with Charlie and Jubilee, but it's a Shane who has a thing with Jubilee that seems like hey, it's like because like, oh, she's spunky, and I was like, I like her moxie kind of situation. I don't know, it felt a little bit more right with Charlie ended up having like a thing with Jubilee, because why would Jubilee be hooking up with a guy who's in a not only in a gang, leading a gang that's more than likely hurting the community, that's holding like some people like Charlie back. But you never see Charlie again. Then Jubilee finds out the counselor has her car stolen, and she uses Shane in order to like, oh, you're connected to the streets, certainly you'll know who might have this car. he eventually gets it back. You never knew who stole the car in the first place. It's just like, that seems like a huge, I won't say a huge plot hole, but it's like a glaring thing that like I noticed when I read this. Is like, okay, who stole the car? It's like a random act of random crime, sure, but it's like, you might think it could easily lead to somewhere if you have this big investigation utilizing this criminal, using his criminal connections to try to track down this car, which ultimately it's thanks to her aunt who found this car and make sure it got brought back. But during these two investigations, after tracking down a couple of gang members, they found out each other had mutant abilities. So I guess that's where you got a kind of like a forced connection. But even still, I don't see Jubilee shouldn't have any interest in a guy like this. It doesn't really make any sense. And I don't really like the character at all. It seems like one of those one and done type of characters. And this should be more of like a Charlie kind of role. Well, at least a role in the fact that they should be having like a thing for each other. This guy even like have asked Jubilee out, and she ends up taking him to her school dance, even though like she wanted to hook up with the jock who keeps going in and out of relationship with that psycho girl. Then once she's trying to get the good news to the counselor about her car returning, he walks in on her and the principal making out, not realizing these two having this kind of relationship. And so she used that as leverage just to get out this kind of extracurricular activity because she doesn't want to do it. She never did, even though she was good at it. So this is where you find out when this guy is 16 years old, and it's like, God, I do not like this character. Seems like he should not be here no more than that one issue that we see him. And this is around the time when it's like the art, I feel, kind of gets lazy, because I think the first two issues of the drawing look a little better, but there's different artists feels like in different issues. And of course, when they go to the dance, they end up staying on for a few minutes just to leave later, because I guess it's not their scene. But Meg and the jock guy, he kind of comes off kind of like I don't say like a jerk, but it's just one of those high school things where it's like, oh, he had a thing for the popular kid because that's two popular kids have to be together. But he actually has some, which it kind of feels like left field, like, because he seems like one of those kind of player types. And he sees Meg sitting at the table while she's supposed to be waiting for Jubilee to show up. He ends up asking her out to dance, and she's like, oh my god, yes, I mean, like, sure, like it's whatever. But it's like he never shown to have any interest in Meg before. Matter of fact, he kind of ignored her, as she often be hanging out with Jubilee. He goes straight for Jubilee, did not even show any kind of acknowledgement to Meg, or at the very least any kind of, at least, because I would have accepted this part if he's seen helping Meg out when it comes to people bullying her. It's like telling people to knock it off, or showing any kind of general kindness to Meg at some point. But it's never really highlighted like that. There's one moment where it's like, Meg found her missing bra in like a closet. Don't know if that got something to do with him getting it back for her. Like I said, it was never really telegraphed, so I can't really count it. So this just seems like out of left field kind of romance, which I imagine seems not only quick, but I doubt will go anywhere. So Jubilee ends up taking Shane back to her place and nearly make out until in comes Wolverine, who earlier in a couple of issues ago tried to call to check up on her, see how everything's going with her. Of course, he was in the middle of fighting ninjas, so he couldn't really talk. So he makes his way to LA to check up on her. All the while, uh, the bodyguard shows up and confesses everything to Jubilee, like, hey, your aunt is actually a hit woman and she's trying to get out of life so she can spend more time with you, but the boss wouldn't let her. So now it's it's like a massive kind of like a shootout, and they track him down to her place. So now Wolverine, Shane, the bodyguard, and Jubilee are now fighting off a bunch of goons. And then here comes the aunt coming on a motorcycle, because she's just like a hip, cool aunt kind of situation that's just badass for no reason. You don't really get much with her, which is kind of weird. It's like you don't spend more time with. You just know that she's into some shady stuff, but she's trying to get out of that. But it's like you could have spent a lot more time with her rather than wasting so much time with this whole gangster crap halfway through. You could have like dedicated that to a little bit more time focused on what's going on with her and her life and like how she got into this mess. So they're all fighting off all these goons, and Wolverine doing his Shane is fighting them off with his finger pistols. Shane's shooting at some people, like, so it's I hope Wolverine's calling people up. Jubilee is setting off all these fireworks, distraction and all this other stuff, until the leader shows up and it's like if you come back with me, all is forgiven and everything like that, and I'll let you guys go. Hope it's like negotiating, like, you let them go and I'll stay and we'll talk. So he lets them all go, despite Jubilee's kind of like reservation about that. But Wolverine hustled her on, like, don't worry, she got this. She knows what she's doing. And then the house blows up, and everybody thinking Hope's dead. So now she feels like nothing is keeping her here anymore. So her and Wolverine, Jubilee and Wolverine decides to take, the flight back to New York. While she's trying to let people know what's up, she let Shane know, like, hey, you can come back with us. There's more room at the X-Mansion. You can learn, how to be a hero and everything like that. Shane's declines, like, like, my place is here. I got a crew to look after, kind of situation. Living his life, I imagine he'll probably end up getting whacked by somebody who gets a lucky shot off. It's not like he's invulnerable from bullets. Then she noticed that Meg and the jock guy, are, together. It's like, oh, good for you, Meg. So to Jubilee's, line of thinking, all's well as ends well. Things could be, despite losing her aunt, the only connection to family she had, she's glad that, like, her friend at least living like having like a, better outcome than she started with. And of course, there's a last panel where, like, Hope is not dead. She's lying in the field being, nursed by some kind of, pedestrian who's running, jogging along, and finds her. And it turns out she has some kind of cybernetic leg that got blown off. So she might have some, like, prosthetic parts. So who knows what's going on with her. But that is the 6-issue run with Jubilee. It could have been better. I'm just glad Jubilee has something, but this could have been played a whole lot better. It's not, the best comic run, honestly. Like I said, like, you didn't really need that gangster stuff going on with Shane. You could have dedicated that third issue with, learning more about Hope and her bodyguard and how they got together and how they got in this life. establish more connection with, because she wanted to have more, getting to know more of Jubilee and spend more time with her. Well, you seem to be preoccupied trying to do your business, but while you're at home, because at one point she got shot and she's being nursed to health by the bodyguard, you could have used that time to spend more with Jubilee, getting to know her interests and what she got going on in her life. We didn't do all that. So it's like, it's not good, honestly, but it's still like a fun romp with a good Jubilee story. And I would love to see more usage of her powers, honestly. It's only maybe like, it's like 3-4 times she actually used her pyrotechnic powers, but only in like short little bursts. It's like, it's a Jubilee story. You want to see Jubilee really flaunt her powers to the degree where she's like really like, when we find off all those goons at the end, really show off like bigger fireworks and kind of like fire explosions or something like that. Didn't do it. So it's like very lackluster, but it's just still fun to have like a Jubilee comic at the very least. But I like Jubilee's, personally, as far as like Jubilee's kind of like arc is very good. I like her counseling these kids, which I could have wished we'd seen a lot more of, because once again, the Mayday Parker MC2 universe, where in that universe Jubilee is running the X-Men, she's a lot more older, and I kind of like to see like Jubilee leaning into the mentorship and noticing how much she has more of like a knack for it than she realized. But yeah, that's Jubilee. Next comic we'll be talking about in the coming days will be one Wolverine and one of his first comics, one of the classics. So look forward to that. The next thing I'll be covering is the season 1 of the 90s X-Men TV show. So look forward to that. I'm going to try to get as much out as possible. There's a lot of X-Men stuff I'm going to be covering in the coming weeks, so I'm trying to get as much out as I can. Not many is going to be that long, except for like the events. I want to make sure most of these are relatively short, so I can like get them fairly quickly, but still long enough to establish what these X-Men characters are all about. So anyway, I will see you guys in a few minutes as I cover season 1 of the 90s X-Men TV show. So follow me in links in the description below, especially my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl. Check out my Patreon, where you can recommend comics, movies, TV shows, or just general topics that you want me to talk about. Patreon members get first access. That's patreon.com/talkativecarl. Links are in the description below, and I'll see y'all in a little bit. Peace.